Hi, my name is Amelia, welcome back to my channel. Today we will be doing another occult book of the month, this time for April, and I actually chose a book that makes somewhat of an amount of sense this time, and that is Witchery by Juliet Diaz. Now, I was introduced to this book through Juliet Diaz's interview on The Witch Wave with my favourite witch of all time, Pam Grossman, who I love. You all know that if you've been watching my wrap-ups. I've been listening to this podcast since January. But yeah, I want to say, like, I was very intrigued going into this. This is a beginner's witchcraft book. Actually, the only beginner book I've read, other than this, was Wicca by Harmony Nights. If you want to see a review for that, I will 100% be willing to do one. I'd already read it when I came up with the idea for this series. I enjoyed this. I thought it was fairly reasonable in all of the different metrics. Speaking of that, let's recap quickly our metrics. I will be rating these books on 3 things. That is 1, readability, 2, accuracy of information, and 3, depth of resources. And the 3 thing is not on purpose, it's a coincidence entirely. Okay, with that intro out of the way, let's get right on into readability. Now, I really loved, this book is very, very readable. Diaz's writing style is amazing. I just found myself, completely absorbed into what she was saying. There was nothing confusing to me. I didn't really find myself having to, Google different terms or concepts to try and get to grips with them. So that was really nice. I also love how friendly and welcoming the tone is throughout the entire book. It's very pure and this is a power that you can have, you can take control of this. You are wonderful and amazing. The whole world is your oyster, and also be nice to Mother Earth because she needs it. And I really, really love that tone just in general of it's not gatekeepy, which I feel like someone who's been raised in witchcraft, a lot of witches, obviously this is not all witches who've been raised in the craft, but a lot of people who have end up being kind of gatekeepy, you need to be born with it or whatever. And Juliet Diaz doesn't do that at all. She's very, very adamant that these are all abilities that you can cultivate, that you don't have to be born with a natural proficiency for anything. As long as you work at it, you will get everything that you ever desired. And I think that that's a really good message to be putting out, that it's not something which you need to be born with, that it can be anyone regardless of gender, sexuality, background, anything like that. I also loved that while acknowledging all of that, she also has this section on the ways in which witchcraft can fall very quickly into cultural appropriation. And I really, really appreciated that. As a white person, a lot of the time I feel like my fellow white people, especially because the religion of Wicca is based a lot on practices which have been co-opted from Eastern mysticism and things like that. And a lot of the time there isn't any credit given, and the excuses made are oh, well, it's still the same god or goddess through the entire of history, so we can do whatever we want with it, without really understanding the cultural implications of what they're doing. There is a difference between culture and religion, and I think that that is important to acknowledge. There is also a difference between religion and witchcraft. Witchcraft is 100% secular. You can be an atheist witch, you can be a Christian witch even, if you want. There's no reason for it to be tied into each other, which is part of the reason why I get a little bit bugged when people equate witchcraft and Wicca. But anyway, I went off on a tangent there. I just found it really amazing that Juliet Diaz went through all of that stuff. It was just brilliant. I appreciated it so much. As for other things, obviously there were no terms I had to look up. I think I mentioned that already. On top of that, she's very good at explaining the basic concepts of what she's doing, as well as instructing, giving instructions. There's not really any confusion as to what you're supposed to do with a lot of the rituals she gives as an example. And I really love that. There's no vagueness. It's all you do this, then you do this, then you do this, and that is how you do this. The only gripe that I have in this section is that she talks a lot about sensing energy, which is something I've never been able to do that well. And she doesn't give any instructions on how to do it for a beginner. she starts off with, sense the energy of the book in the first ritual for someone who's completely inexperienced, bearing in mind. And I sat there thinking, I'm an experienced witch and I can't even do this. So, you know, there are some pitfalls to the straightforward style. Obviously, like, every book is going to have its flaws. Nothing is 100% perfect, and that is what makes things beautiful and interesting. Anyway, moving on swiftly to our next section, which is accuracy of information. For the most part, the magical concepts are pretty much 100% accurate. There isn't really anything that I could dispute, at least not from my level of practice. I have joked that I'm like a level 3, level 4 witch. Like, I'm not the most experienced, but I'm also not a complete beginner. And I found that, like, with most of it, with the amount of research that I've done, it basically aligned pretty much 100%. There's a consistency there, everything is, like, it flows well, it makes sense. I did find slightly uncomfortable was when you get to the healing section, there is a lack of a disclaimer saying that if you think you're in serious trouble, seek proper medical care, because spiritual healing and herbal medicine, like, the one thing that is so important to remember about that is that that is a complementary treatment. That is not supposed to be your only treatment for any ailment. The one spell, like, obviously this makes sense that there isn't a disclaimer, like, bear with me, I'll get into it. But the reason why there isn't a disclaimer is she doesn't actually give any physical healing spells. She gives spells for alleviating distress in certain areas, so for example after the loss of a loved one or things like that. Like, more emotional issues, and then she gives one spell which is pain relief and illness relief where you suck it out through your feet using garlic, and obviously that's not dangerous, it won't hurt, but like, and it's not intended to be a supplement for a treatment, it's just meant to take away all the negative energy that builds up when you're sick. So while I did understand why there wasn't the disclaimer, I also feel like just in case there should have been, like, because some people inevitably are going to see that and think, well, I can get rid of my pneumonia by using a garlic foot bath. And it's like, no, you can't do that. Please go see a doctor. And that is, like, the number one thing that you need to know about witchcraft. It is complementary. It is not meant to be physical, unless if you are a trained herbalist, and even then, like, a lot of the time just taking the actual drugs that the doctor gives you is way better because they're way more, like, well tested and engineered. Like, it's the same herbs, it's the same components, but they've got it down to a T. They've perfected the art in the same way that this is a lot looser version of it. So yeah, while I will take ginger for my nausea, I am not going to substitute propranolol for lavender. So though I 100% trust that Juliet Diaz knows what she's doing with regards to her own practice, it would have been nice, I think, to have in every section, like with the spells that she gives, to have an explanation of why we need each thing. We do get that to some extent with the cleansing spells, but as you go on you find that you don't have really an explanation of why certain things are in certain spells, and although I know that this is meant to be a short, brief, whistle-stop tour of witchcraft, I still think it would have been nice to have use flowers for this reason, or use this herb for this purpose because it has these properties. In the second ritual, the bath ritual, to expel negative energy and let go of the ghosts of your past and so on, it says to use flowers. And the only flowers I had available to me were bluebells, which are irritant. So I actually messaged Juliet Diaz on Instagram, and props to her for getting back to me. She said that you can leave them out, so pro tip there. Yeah, like, a lot of the time I feel like it would have been nice to have that little bit of explanation so you know, like, if you really, like, if you can substitute this for something else with similar properties. I know often she does actually offer you the substitutes as well, as like, you can use this or this or this. And it's really, like, that's really good. Personally, like, I don't like spells where it's just like, you have to use this and I'm not going to explain why you have to use this. I feel like if you say that you have to use one specific thing, you gotta explain why that specific thing is so important. Otherwise it just comes across as a little bit disingenuous. So yeah, I really did feel like that would have been nice to have. Although for the most part, like, the information, like the depth of resources is very helpful. And as a further point to that, there are ritual ideas. From the very start of the book, you're offered a ritual to do to begin with, and then you go on, and there's even a section, actually let me find it, there's even a section at the start where it gives you the list of rituals and all the different things you can do with them, and that is so helpful. Like, you can go back and revisit all of the different rituals, and you can do all of the things, and you can go to it whenever you need. There's a quick way to find them. I really, really love that. And I feel like, as someone who's been kind of stagnant in my practice, especially because of like the world getting in my way and just feeling like I don't have any guidance, seeing this was like so helpful. I did 2 rituals in 1 week, and that is unheard of for me. That was completely new to me, and I just enjoyed it so much. I was so happy to be able to explore this more practical aspect of my craft. As you can see, I do wear sigils. This is a sigil that I'm wearing currently, but I don't do much else other than that, and being able to be guided through these rituals and be given specific examples of things to do which will probably work was very helpful. And I did find that even though I wasn't entirely sure that it was working, because obviously I'm not great at sensing energy, I did find that I felt quite a lot better after doing the release of the Let Go of Your Ghost's Bath. That was pretty good. I enjoyed that a lot. I do want to make it very, very abundantly clear that this is a beginner's book. It's very basic. The depth of the resources is not as much as, say, The Green Witch, which even, like, this is pretty basic compared to, like, the amount of detail that is there in the craft. And that makes perfect sense, because it is for a beginner. It is for people who are 100% new to this scenario. Like, they're 100% new to witchcraft. They're not really, like, experienced with it in any way. They just found that they have this curiosity and they want to explore that a little bit more. And yeah, that's going to be basic. You don't want to bog them down with like the full detail and lists of deities and all of the different uses for lavender and all of the different reasons why you don't have to use sage for cleansing. Like, just having a brief half a paragraph on like, this is why this isn't 100% necessary and you can substitute it for other things, was fine. I didn't see any issue with not having that depth with this, because the purpose of this isn't to give you like super in-depth advice. It's not very specialized. It's there for your beginning. It's there for you to start with, to get you into it, and then you can pursue wherever you want to go after that. And I really love that. I thought that that was really helpful for me, like very insightful, and I thought it was great. I thought it was really good. Yeah, so let's get on to my overall thoughts. So obviously I would 100% recommend this for a beginner, because it is a book for beginners. It is great, just with a few disclaimers as to don't use herbal medicine instead of actual medicine. It's meant to be used in conjoinment. Make sure that you're telling your doctor what things you're taking herbally, because they can contradict certain medications and all that kind of jazz. And also just little bits and pieces on like, be careful with this stuff, which is fine, because there is be careful with the stuff in the book, but a lot of the time I feel like people don't take that advice seriously. Be careful with this stuff. Yeah, I would 100% recommend this for the beginning. Whatever. I also feel like if you are a more experienced practitioner, you aren't going to get much out of the book other than maybe a sense of joy, like Diaz's beautiful writing style that is just so positive and nourishing. And yeah, like I found it really enjoyable to read. It was like a comfort read for me. It was so comfortable and so just like nurturing, and I really appreciate that kind of nurturing aspect to her writing, because it is so helpful for someone who needs to be nurtured into the craft. So yeah, those are my thoughts. Ultimately I would recommend this for beginners. I think I gave it 4 stars at the end of the day, because I thought it was really good. If you are interested in witchcraft, I recommend this. I vaguely remember cutting this out of my Green Witch video, but I did recommend this for anyone who was perhaps writing a Green Witch, using it as a resource to write a character who is into this stuff when they perhaps are not. This one, however, I wouldn't recommend for a writer, mostly because it is getting it very much into like the craft itself, and it's less so of a this is how people practice and more of a this is how to start practicing yourself, if the difference between that makes any degree of sense. But yeah, it's a good book, and look how beautiful it is. Look how beautiful that is. This is just gorgeous. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. I will see you all next time with next month's occult book. I am not entirely sure what I want to be reading next month, so if any of you have any ideas, please let me know. I will take them all into my mind, I will absorb them into my being, and then I will read them, hopefully, and then review them so that you all can see what I think of them. Obviously, I don't want to be recommended books that are over a tenner, because, like, I'm poor. I can't afford books that are over a tenner right now. So yeah, recommend stuff, but don't recommend like a $50 book on Druidism, because I'm not going to be able to review that, sorry. Anyway, that is it for this video. Thank you all for watching. I will see you all next time. Goodbye!